Hey everybody, how do you really nurture your team and build a bulletproof culture? That's the topic for this episode for Soul Searching, the Soul Recruitment Podcast. So we have a great show for you today. This is a topic that's very, very close to my heart, the topic of company culture. Now we have Nick Hedges from ResolveHR. Nick is an accomplished human resource and workplace relations advisor, having worked with some of Australia's most high-profile companies in industries such as finance, retail, manufacturing, professional services, fintech, health and aged care. With a wide variety of expertise, knowledge and skills, Nick prides himself on finding a strategic, commercially viable solution for clients while minimising risk and exposure. So without further ado, let's welcome Nick. Nick, how you doing?
Good, how are you, Darren?
Very well. Thanks for coming.
Thanks
really
for
appreciate
having me.
it.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited about this podcast.
Yeah, likewise.
This is a topic that I absolutely love, and I'm finding myself Vimeoing and podcasting and posting about this topic all the time. So really appreciate it. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, good. Should be fun.
Excellent. So tell us a bit about you.
So I don't know if I can add much more to that intro. I've been in this business for, I started this business 10 years ago.
Wow.
And really it's an HR consultancy advisory. So for small, medium businesses that really don't have HR support. So anywhere, I deal with businesses from anywhere from say 5 employees to about say 200.
Wow.
And even that bigger size, I have clients that are slightly bigger than that, and they might already have HR departments, but I then come in as a specialist or an extra pair of hands on projects and those sorts of things. But the sort of things that I really get involved with, I work a lot on compliance and terminations of employment and performance management, underperformance, and how do we get more out of their performance and policies and all that sort of stuff. So I do that. I do a lot of bullying and harassment sort of gigs, which people often go, that must be hard. I go, it's quite hard, but it's really interesting. Yeah. Everything's a new day. Yeah.
And these days, what about cyberbullying? Is that something that comes into your territory now?
Huge. Yeah, it's becoming more and more.
Yeah.
And then social media and all that stuff as well plays a part on that.
Yeah.
I do a lot of training.
Yep, great.
And then finally, which is what we're going to talk about today, we do a lot of stuff around leadership and values and culture and developing employee engagement and getting people to feel more engaged within their workplaces. And then obviously there's the advice piece that comes across all that. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I mean, this is really important even from a recruitment point of view. Recruitment is one part of the hiring process or one part of the acquiring of quality talent process. Keeping people and keeping them for a long time and nurturing them is another whole part of the process. So I can't stress that enough. Hiring is only one part. Keeping them and nurturing them and helping them develop and all that is so important. So that's all what we're going to talk about today.
Totally.
So mate, how do you build a company? What does company culture mean? Why is it so important these days?
It's a big topic,
Yes.
and we're going to try to smash it in a small period of time. But culture can be a lot of different things. But culture can be the way we do things around here, and that's often the way the concept of culture is understood. So the way things are, the way people do things within their workplace,
Almost like a religion.
Yeah, a little bit the way things are understood. You know, when you work with us, you should expect the following, whether it be behaviours or what we do and those sorts of things. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is. But it really, what culture does as well is helps to define a business. And it's not just a business strategy that helps define where we're going, but also the culture helps to define it. So the more we have that, and when we talk about the beliefs and value systems and our traditions, like the religion type of concept or that analogy, it's what sets us apart as an organisation to others that really defines our culture. And that's really what culture is about. Definitely.
And people can tell, they can feel culture more than they can see it. A lot of people, even in recruitment, people ask me to, define the culture. Give me an example of the culture. It's hard.
Yeah.
Like really defining a company culture is difficult. You have to feel it. You have to live it.
It is hard to define, and one of the things I like to do with a lot of clients that I work with is we try to define it as best as we can. So what's underlying what makes people feel good and coming to your workplace, right?
Absolutely.
And so what is that about? And we try to sort of expand on that. But one thing I would say is that a good culture is going to attract good talent, right? So you'd know better than anybody.
Yep.
A good culture, a fun place to work, a place where people are generally got a great vibe. You're going to be able to sell that, in a sense, in inverted commas,
Definitely.
to a future candidate. Then if they're thinking of some stoic, dead in the water, this is the way we've always done it, and like it or lump it sort of thing,
Exactly.
culture. So it increases engagement. It helps to attract talent.
Yep.
A good culture is going to basically create a satisfying environment for people that and when you talk about retention, that wants them to stay. They're going to, why would I want to leave? It's great here. The people are great. The way that they treat us are great. What I'm getting is great. The work I'm doing is meaningful. All of that sort of stuff. And that's all culture.
Absolutely. And I'll even add to that. It's getting people to actually become your advocates and your promoters of your brand to the outside world, because that in turn attracts more talent to the company.
Totally.
And it's building that brand. They're your advocates out there. They're your soldiers out there every day working for you.
Totally. It's your free advertising.
100%.
If you've got a great culture, people, when you go out with people on a Saturday night for dinner and they go, how's work? I'm loving it. It's fantastic.
This is what we did.
What makes it so good? Yeah, this is what we did on Friday.
Yeah.
This is what happened on Monday.
Yeah.
We do this once a month, and they're kind of going, wow, I'd love to work in a place like that.
Or my manager pulled me inside for a meeting and just said, how you doing?
Yeah.
How's life?
Exactly.
Are you enjoying it?
Exactly.
What can we do?
Yeah.
Anything we can do to help you? Are your aspirations being met?
Yeah.
These are the things that build company culture.
Totally. Totally. Exactly. And I think sort of the way we've just described in the last few minutes is that's really encapsulating what culture it is, what culture is, and really why it's important, and why defining your culture is important. And it's not just some HR easy project to do.
No.
There's a meaning behind it, and the more that people understand it and relate that to their values of their workplace, all of those things that we talked about with engagement and attracting talent and retaining talent and all that stuff just becomes almost habit forming, and that's just the way it's done.
It's a fundamental. And you need, companies need to be thinking about their company culture and developing their culture and developing their people more so than anything else. Their people are their biggest asset.
Yeah.
People I don't understand. There are so many companies out there, and I hear it every day from a recruitment point of view, and people saying, oh, look, things aren't, the company culture is not great. People are not really aligned. Sometimes what I was sold initially for the role is not actually what they want me to do. All these disconnected factors.
Totally.
And this is exactly what causes problems, and that not allows people to stay and build that nurturing environment for the future.
Exactly. And I mean, to use an example, right? I mean, if somebody is hiring an accountant, everybody relates to that, right? I need an accountant. Anybody who's qualified to be an accountant can just do the job.
Yeah.
They've got the skills, they've got the capabilities, they might even have the experience, no problem. The question is, though, does that person culturally fit within your organisation from a workplace perspective? Are they going to get along with everybody? Are they going to be able to relate? Are they going to be able to communicate their issues? Or are they just going to sit there and crunch numbers in a spreadsheet? So having the right person in that role is as important as knowing what the role you need done.
Exactly. 100%. And so many of my clients are starting to do that, and they're recruiting the people first and fitting them into the organisation later.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a proactive way to recruit, and I think that's so important because these days, quality talent is very short.
Yeah.
And it's about the people, and as you say, it's about finding out what the value of that person is, what the intrinsic values are, and fitting that into the values of the company. Yeah. That's how you make fits. That's how you make matches.
What makes them tick and what makes your organisation tick. And can we marry the two up? Exactly.
Then you've got a winner.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Perfect. So how do you build a bulletproof culture?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And look, I'm sure if any HR consultant out there or any culture expert or any leadership coach, they'll have different interpretations to what I'm going to say. I'm just going to talk about one topic, or so one area, if you like, of a possible way of building a great culture. And
I'm all ears.
Yeah. All right.
This is gold, audience. This is gold.
Okay. So one of the things that I often talk about with my clients is around the concept of a three-legged stool.
Nice.
So if you think of a three-legged stool, it needs three legs to stand up.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're losing a leg, it falls.
Yeah.
So the three main aspects of what I would call whether it's culture, what I would refer to as a high-performing team, because anybody can just have a team, which is exactly what we said. We can just have an accountant doing the job, but we want a high-performing team that is united. And the three aspects are around trust, relationships, and open and honest communication.
Nice.
And so the challenge for any organisation is to define them within their own organisation. So you'll have a concept, Darren, of what trust is in a workplace, and I'll have a concept. So when I'm working with my clients, we spend time actually going through, what does that mean? What does trust mean to you? And if I'm working with you, how does that trusting relationship actually work? What would I expect? Right? Likewise with a relationship. What does a professional relationship look like to you, and what does it look like to me? And how are we going to make that work?
Because everybody has a different definition.
Exactly.
According to their history, their background, their culture, there are a million different variations.
Totally. And you know, it's obvious, but everybody's different. But at the same time, people have different levels of sensitivity and different levels of sense of humour and different, you know, different
needs, different wants.
Yeah, everybody
triggers.
Correct. So it's all about trying to understand. And then the third aspect with open and honest communication is that, can we have an honest communication with somebody that if my relationship with you isn't feeling right, or if you've made a decision that I don't implicitly trust, can I have that open and honest communication with you? And so when we talk about culture, those three are three very broad aspects that really help to bind a high-performing team. And what happens is that if you don't have those three aspects, that's fine. You'll function and it'll happen, but you'll have periods of stagnation or low low engagement and those sorts of things, because people don't feel that overall connection, or they're not feeling that overall connection specifically with their direct manager or their team leader or their supervisor, and that's really important. And that's all also underpinned when we talk about what creates a bulletproof culture, to your question. So it's those three factors, but also then defining what are your values and what's important to your company. So people often talk about integrity or honesty is important. It is important.
People like to throw around a lot of these words and vision statements and mission statements, but do they really live it? That's another whole story.
And that's a fundamental point you've just made.
They live it.
And living it means, what are the behaviours? Right. So integrity, that's great. Let's write it up.
Let's
put it on every wall, right? But at the end of the day, what does integrity mean to you? What does it mean to me? And what does it mean from an organisational perspective?
And if I can add, it's got to come from the top down. You know, culture is built from the top down. The leader has to be living this philosophy, this religion, these values, and everybody else will in turn osmotically follow.
Yes.
You know, it has to be driven that way. It doesn't happen just in an isolated form, and it's not just a phrase that we put up every team meeting once a month and put it on the whiteboard and forget about it. You know, this has got to be your everyday philosophy.
Totally. Exactly. And you know, to that end, a fish rots from the head. Right? So that's why, to your point, you know, the leadership, the executive, the management, they're the ones who have to drive it. And if they're not engaged with it, and if they don't know what it's about, well then, how is anybody else going to know what it's about?
The manager can't sit in his ivory tower and never see anybody and never interact with anybody and expect him to influence the culture of the rest of his team. They never even see him or her. So you know, it's these are the things that are so fundamental. And I talk to candidates every day, hundreds of candidates, disgruntled candidates about different situations and whatever. That's why they're looking to move. And a lot of the time, probably 8 times out of 10, it's an issue with the company culture.
Exactly. And I'd imagine you're probably asking them questions, what sort of culture do you want to work in? And I'm sure they're asking you back, what's the culture of the place?
100%.
And often that might be difficult to articulate. It is. But what we do know is when we see a good culture, we recognise it.
Definitely.
And so that's interesting. And both you and I in our travels would have seen a lot of different good and less good, rather than totally bad, but good and less good.
100%. And the way that I answer that actually is I say, look, you know, I tell them, you know, it's very supportive, it's collaborative, people stay for the long term, but it's really about what are the statistics. And I say, look, the people that have been in this organisation that I've placed all absolutely love it. They say it's everything that you said it was going to be from the beginning. And I said the staff retention is incredible. People are there for 5-10 years. To me, that is an example of the culture, because it is hard to sell, it is hard to explain, but that says it all already.
Yeah,
You know,
that's one of the key aspects for sure. You know, we often run engagement surveys and things like that because we want to get an understanding of what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. And we do that when we first start working with a client, and then we do that periodically as we're working through our time with them, because it's interesting to see what changes. But what we were just talking about there is also then getting feedback from your team.
Definitely.
Is vitally important. That's going to help define your culture, because it's not just what the owner of the business says or the MD says, this is what I want the culture to be. Well,
100%.
Have we got buy-in? You know, and that's really important, right?
And so getting feedback from a team and actually being prepared to accept that feedback and do something with it.
Well, yeah, and part of a good culture is being open to hearing, and we talk about the three-legged stool, open communication. Well, are you open to hearing feedback about what we could improve here? So, I mean, we could talk about this for days on end, but I think that sort of, in a nutshell, is sort of part of the philosophy that we work with clients around culture and values.
I love it. The three-legged stool. So what are the three? Trust, relationships, and
open and honest communication.
Open and honest communication. I love it. That's that's absolute fundamental stuff. Have you got an example, like maybe a test case or an example of something that you can share with us?
Yeah, I've probably got many, but one that I often talk about is an example that happened a little while ago, where a client of mine approached me and he said, Nick, this fellow was in real estate, and he said, Nick, I'm losing my best people. You know, I train them up, I teach them the ropes, I show them all my stuff, and then they leave and they go to the guy across the road, or down the road or whatever. And he goes, so what have I got to do to keep them? How do I keep these people?
Right.
And I said to him, the simple answer is, I don't know, but they will know. And I mean, we can talk about three-legged stool, right, in that concept, but did he have a trusting relationship? Did he have a relationship that they could relate to each other in general, where they not necessarily had to like each other, but they could relate to each other, and they could talk about things other than work as well that might be important, and also were they open and honest with each other? So when this guy approached me, he said to me, Nick, from a real estate perspective, he said, look, I've bought this guy suits. I've bought him 3 or 4 suits over the last year. I've made sure he's got petrol in his car. I take him to the most amazing lunches, and I'm not talking about lunches just any willy-nilly. I'm talking about going down into the city and Woolloomooloo, Finger Wharf, and the best of the best, and I introduce him to the best echelons of society, because I'm an eastern suburbs based real estate agency, and I'm introducing them to everybody, and yet these people leave. Right. And I said to him, the fundamental question that you're not asking them is, A, you're not asking them, you're telling them what's important, and B is you need to be asking them what is important to them. Because maybe all that stuff is important to you, having the nice suit and having petrol in your car and having a nice car and all of that is important to you. But whilst that's important to drum up business, what actually might be important to them is the nurturing, which is what you said, 100%. The development. Where am I going to be? Maybe they want to be like you. They want to be a principal of an agency at some point, or be your partner. And what are they going to need to do to get there? So they're going to need sales training. They're going to need other, what is it that they need? And he said, I don't ask them. And I said, well, let's start with that. Let's start with that.
Absolutely.
And it was a fundamental paradigm shift that he needed to make, where he just assumed, well, they just want to go and sell. And selling equaled money. So if they're just earning money, they'll be fine. And clearly, the 2 or 3 people that are left was more. It was about more than money.
Incredible, And to me, it's just, this stuff is so obvious and so logical when you think about it. At the core, we're all human beings. We're all driven by our own needs and wants and aspirations, and a company culture has to take all that into account. A good leader, a good manager, has to be very, very close to their team, his or her team, understand what drives them, and allow them to move down their own roadmap. And everybody's roadmap is slightly different. But as long as they're all connected via a core, broad set of values and philosophy, then everything will continue to sail in the right direction.
Totally. But I think it also works the other way as well. Like it's also allowing a manager or an executive or a business owner to also allow themselves to be a bit vulnerable and to also open up themselves. So whilst they're asking the person on the other side what's important to them, have that two-way conversation and say, look, what's important to me is that I want you to be nurtured. So you tell me, and this is my experience. This is what I've had. This is the way I got nurtured and sort of got to where I'm at is because of this. So sharing those sorts of experience. I mean, a key author that I really subscribe to is Brene Brown, and she's great. If you have an opportunity to read her book, she's got a new book at the moment called Dare to Lead, which is all about this stuff around vulnerability, and good leadership needs to be vulnerable as well. So we've got this concept in our head that from the old days of a leader needs to be the knower of all things and be the strongest person and all of that. And yes, they do need to make strong decisions. There's no question about that. But a good leader can also allow themselves to be emotionally vulnerable as well.
Perfect. And I think even more so, that's what makes a good leader, is to show the human side.
Yeah, but when we're talking about culture and relating that back to culture, good leadership is about vulnerable leadership as much as strong decisions and also opening up and understanding what's important to their people.
I love that, because that allows people to connect at a deeper level. That's human beings, social interaction and human interaction. And what was the name of that book again?
Brene Brown is the author, and it's Dare to Lead.
Dare to Lead.
Dare to Lead.
Dare to Lead. Gotcha.
Lead.
Okay, love it. Yeah. Awesome. Now, I've heard of a couple of terms being thrown around with regards to this topic. Intrinsic versus extrinsic values. What's all that about?
Okay. Well, again, we could do a whole podcast just on that, right? But look, very simply, I think intrinsic is what drives us internally, and extrinsic is what feeds us externally. Gotcha. So from an external perspective, extrinsically, what drives an employee is obviously they need money to live. So when you know this, when you're first recruiting somebody, the first thing is, well, how much is it paying?
Sure.
And you're in a negotiation with them to make sure that they feel satisfied. And I intentionally use the word satisfied there and not motivated.
Yes.
Some people are clearly only driven by money, and that is their sole motivator. But in my experience, that's less so. Most people are driven from a satisfaction perspective by the money that they earn, and that's to a point. And the example I would use is if you're on $100,000 now and you feel great because you were previously on $85,000 and I got you $100,000, you'd feel great. But after 6 months, 12 months, well, that just becomes your wage, your status quo, and that's how you live. And is another $5,000 going to make a huge amount of difference to you? It might satisfy you, but it's not going to be a huge motivator. Is another $10,000? Maybe not. Okay, if you doubled your wage, it might, but chances of that happening is
not this day and age.
Exactly. But so extrinsic versus intrinsic is really about so money only goes so far, and money is an extrinsic motivator and potentially intrinsic. But it's really about what is the company doing for me intrinsically. And you talked about this earlier on in the podcast around what are they feeding me? Is there coaching? Is there mentoring? Is there training and development? What's my next step? And think about the real estate agent example. What was his next step was, well, did my manager ever sit down with me and go, what's important to me? And go, well, what is important to you? Well, what's important to me is the language of selling, or in a real estate perspective, or how to drum up more business, or how to get a listing, but then how to but it's the training and the development and all of that sort of stuff, not the expensive suit and the petrol in the car, right?
Not the high level superficial stuff.
But also you mentioned before around praising and recognition, and that's super important. Intrinsically, sometimes I talk about handshakes, fist pumps, and high fives, right?
I love it.
So is that enough? The pat on the back, so to speak, right? Great job, Darren. You've done a great job, and I just want you to know that I've seen how hard you've worked, and you go, oh, wow, that means more to me than another $1,000. So we talk about providing positive feedback. We talk about giving them meaningful and challenging projects, getting them to make decisions so that they feel empowered, and that's really an intrinsic type of thing. And so when people talk about what makes a great culture, those sort of factors, it's going, well, my boss implicitly trusts me, right? Three-legged stool, trusts me to make a decision, right? That I don't have to check in every time, that there's not this micromanagement. Because at the end of the day, the team member can see their contribution, and they're getting recognition of their contribution, and those are intrinsic values. Extrinsic, obviously, we talked about money, reward systems, bonuses, all of those things. But it's also the things like
staff lunches,
the massages,
Christmas parties,
the table tennis
whatever,
tables,
gym memberships,
the drinks on Friday and all of that. I mean, you need all that.
Yep.
You need a good external feeling of great vibe and all of that. You need all that, but at the same time, you need the internal factors as well, and they're just as important as the extrinsic.
And I'd say they might even be more important. I mean, generally, if you have a company or maybe a company with a slightly limited budget or a culture that's still building, having strong intrinsic values and an intrinsic core philosophy will still allow you to retain your staff more so than if you just concentrate on those other things.
Yeah,
and so important.
Yeah, and often you can relate both the extrinsic and the intrinsic, right? So if you do have a table tennis table, what the company's saying is, we want you to we don't want it to be all about work. We want you to go out and have a breakout time. So intrinsically, we want you to have a bit of a work-life balance as well,
and it can relate to both.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's intrinsic and extrinsic.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, to me, I could go on forever, but this topic is absolutely fascinating and it's fundamental to anybody running, leading, building a company, and even working in a company. You have to know what you need to expect. You've got to know what you want. People have to. It's also about self-awareness. People have to sit down and think about what do they really want.
Yeah.
What do they want to get out of the next 5 years, and then they have to know how to communicate that. And they have to make sure that they're aligned with the company that's hiring them or they're working for. And these conversations need to be had. Because that, as I said, a culture and your people are your biggest asset. And if they're not happy, everything breaks down.
Yeah, and I think particularly, look, we're doing this a week or so before Christmas, and as we sort of think about tying up the year or next year, I would encourage people that are listening to this to actually sit down, if you're a business leader, if you're a team leader, a supervisor, even a team member, to think about having this conversation with your team, with your organisation. Go, right, what are we about? What defines us, and what makes us great as a culture, to help us. So that helps on a recruitment perspective, but it also helps on every other level as well. So we can start to improve those intrinsic and extrinsic values.
100%. And even as a recruiter, I'm shooting myself in the foot by saying this. If companies would build a culture that's that strong, they would be able to attract more people to them without even using me. I'm even shooting myself in the foot by saying that, but that is so powerful. And I just want people to understand that that's how this works.
It's so important. Yeah, it really is. It really is.
That's how this works.
It's not just about the dollars and cents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. That was sensational. As I said, we could go on forever, but I'd love to be able to leave this, maybe a part 2.
Yeah, let's do it.
In the future. So if anybody has any questions or wants some more information, please let us know. Send me an email, darren@solverecruitment.com.au. Or Nick, what's yours?
Nick at ResolveHR, one word, resolvehr.com.au.
If anybody's looking for a fantastic HR consultant, ResolveHR. So probably our last podcast before Christmas, or maybe not. But everybody, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Nick.
See you later. Thanks for having me.